that's fine. I quite like a bit of that.
So you can be much more relaxed than you were not.
I would have combed my hair if you told me that.
Yeah, we always need to say that this is a kind of a video cast, not a typical audio podcast.
Sure.
Yeah, and we should be coming live at the moment. If we are already live, welcome to our audience. I'm already here with Teon Rosandic, the VP EMEA at Talkdesk. Let's just wait another 30 seconds as people join us in the conversation before we kind of compress all the lessons throughout your career and scaling up companies. And I know that you have a very interesting career path from what I saw on LinkedIn, and we are actually live. So welcome to our audience to the Scaleup Valley podcast. You can see previous episodes about the scaling up journey of some of the best tech companies in the world at scaleupvalley.com/community. This is the 62nd episode of the podcast, and we have the pleasure of hosting today Teon Rosandic, the VP EMEA at Talkdesk. Teon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great, thanks for having me online. And apologies, I'm stuck at home today. I've been on conference call back to back. Forecast calls today, and deal reviews, and also a lot of good business happening. So you caught me in my attic here in my study.
That's awesome. And before we actually start our conversation, I would just like to congratulate Eric Yuan and Nick Chong from Zoom for their IPO. They've been strong supporters of what we do and trying to help as much as they can. So we are really happy at the Scaleup Valley team to congratulate you for the amazing milestone and wishing you to keep scaling in the future for the next milestones. So coming back to you, Teon, I'm really excited about this conversation. Yeah, we kind of know very well Talkdesk. We had on the show CK, your VP of Product. We have as regular moderator of our engineering episodes, Pedro Torres, your Director of Engineering of the office in Porto. We'll have soon Shauna from the talent team. So, and we know that you have roots in Portugal, but you have really scaled where the majority of the leadership team is based in the US. And happy to see that you are coming back to EMEA with a very strong presence and kind of conquering the market here as well. And but before we go there, it would be nice to understand what has been your career until now, and then let's do the jump for Talkdesk.
Yeah, absolutely. So I must say I haven't had a typical career. I'm a very interesting individual. When I left university, I originated from South Africa, as you can hear from my accent, Johannesburg. I went to school and grew up in Johannesburg my whole life. And when I left university, I studied business. I moved into my own company immediately. So I was an entrepreneur from day one, which was a fantastic, how can I say, foundation to the way that I work and the way that my mind thinks. So I'm very much of a person that's always had opportunities in my career and have looked for opportunities into my career to build the businesses, to grow teams, to support the growth of individuals, and really to have go through that journey of growth. So when I left, I had my own company. Like I said, it was a technology company. I did very well. I sold my shares off, and I moved into the UK at that point. And I worked for a number of large and small sized mainly American software companies over the few years. So people like BMC Software. I also worked for Marimba, and also a few other companies which are really strong. Most recently, I worked for Genesis and also worked for X Matters, where I actually had a really strong ride. I mean, X Matters was a lot of fun. Again, also growing teams and establishing their European operation, which was a huge amount of fun.
That's awesome. And why Talkdesk
Yeah,
at this moment on your career? And just present briefly for the ones who didn't have yet opportunity to learn about Talkdesk, what
sure.
Talkdesk does, please.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, Talkdesk, I always say to people, is a very, very special company. I think where Talkdesk are on their whole, if you want to call it hype cycle, where they are on their kind of their growth trajectory, I think they're in a very special position. As a company, what they do is, they don't do anything specifically amazing as far as, something, completely different to what other people do. But what they just do it so much better. They do it with so much more elegance and with so much more ease of use. So as an application, they provide, contact center software in the cloud, but they are the new fresh version of that. They are the cloud 2 providers. So the way that the product's architected, the way that they built businesses being built around being, very scalable, being very customer centric, and also being very adaptable to their marketplace and to the ecosystems that they operate in. It's a very special company. Why I joined? Absolutely. I mean, who wouldn't join a special company that's growing at a phenomenal rate? So it's a really interesting place to be. So I think what made me join is, I was really looking for, Genesis. I was very happy there, but as an organization, they've been around for 30 years, and I went there for a very specific reason. And I was looking for a company that really had a very, very high growth trajectory, and that's really what attracted me to Talkdesk. I obviously knew the market from Genesis, so I knew the contact center market very well, the challenges, the market in Europe, etc. And combining that with a high growth and my entrepreneurial background to come to work for Talkdesk was a perfect kind of combination. And I think the things as well that attracted me to the business were, the leadership of the company. Tiago is a fantastic person, and also the way he's grown the business, and really the humble beginnings of where Talkdesk has come from have been very inspirational. And I enjoy working with people with a lot of character, and he definitely has a lot of character, which is great. So his vision is kind of, it's contagious, and it's good to have people around you which have the same kind of views as you do.
And it's amazing the leadership team that is putting together during the last years. It's really, really impressive. It seems that I'm always when I think that the team is done, it is always surprising us with another monster, let's say.
Absolutely.
In the friendly way, joining the team. So, and why EMEA at this stage of the company?
Sorry, do you mind just repeating that? The line just dropped there for a second.
Yeah, no worries. So I was saying that why EMEA at this stage? So we know that Talkdesk started almost in Portugal, and that's where product and engineering are based. Then Tiago went to the Valley, where he has been there almost since the beginning of the company. And the sales side and the marketing side have scaled amazingly in the US, and now time to come to EMEA, and starting, of course, in I say of course because that's usually the route to EMEA, starting with the UK.
Yep.
Very key markets there. So yeah, let us know why this is the right timing to scale there, and what are your plans, your mission?
Absolutely. So Europe for Talkdesk is a strategic move. As a company, we've had good success across the world, and especially in the US, where obviously we've been operating for the last few years. And actually, as you know, we have had operations in Portugal for a few years now as well, which have mainly been operational resources and operationally focused. But saying that, we've actually attracted about 250 customers across the EMEA region. So we have customers in Germany, we've got a few in Russia, we've got all over the place, and these are just companies that are being attracted to what we do because of the nature of the elegance of our solution and all the things I mentioned before. But it really is an untapped market. But I think more to the point, I think the market we're in at the moment now, the contact center market and where it's going, and also the customer experience market, it is such a buoyant market as far as every company that's looking to innovate and every company that's looking to grow, on the top 3 agenda or top 5 agenda of their CEO is how do they service their customer, how do they drive innovation around their customer experiences, and how do they really build a business by being better at servicing their customers. So, we appeal directly to that, and we fit directly into that. So when you look at the growth in the marketplace, you have to be in Europe in order to satisfy the demand. And there are quite a few vendors in the market, as we know. I'm well aware of the competition out there, and we need to be in the fight, because there will be a window of opportunity that we need to be part of, and in 3 years from now, Europe will be a very different place. So we have to have a bit of a positioning and a land grab that we have to be part of. So it's definitely a strategic play for us. And I think also where Talkdesk is going in the future, as far as their global growth and kind of where we want to grow as a business, having a very strong European presence, a very strong operations presence, but also a very strong go-to-market organization has to be part of the overall plan. We can't just be strong in North America and then weak in Europe. We have to have a global presence, and I'm sure in the future we'll even go further east into Asia Pacific. That's the next on the horizon, maybe next year, who knows.
It makes sense. And this is a very important point that we can already start the conversation about scaling up and some of your lessons there. So usually what we see in the space is when you get to in the Scaleup journey, you tend to try to go to many fronts, to many battles, and to not pick the battles where we can win. And of course, you have also reached the milestone of 500 people worldwide. So we kind of have this feeling we are not anymore a startup. We can fight much fast. In that sense, sometimes focus can be an issue. So how do you assure that the team is focused on those 1, 2, or 3 big rocks for the company? And would you say, as you shared in the beginning, that this would be much more regarding providing an amazing customer experience or customer support service, or it could be much more on the acquisition front? So that the goal here would be to start serving clients closer to them, or also scaling our base of clients.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I mean, focus is so important, and I think I know from experience and also from seeing how many technology companies come to Europe without a proper strategy, without a proper focus, you can get very lost and waste a lot of resources and time in the process. From our side, we've had a very conscious journey of establishing a base in the UK and growing across Europe from there. So from our perspective, it's very much of a kind of a conscious development in the way we're going about it. Does that answer your question? So you just broke up halfway through your question. I was just concerned I didn't get the whole thing there.
Yeah, I'm also feeling the same on your side. Hopefully the audience is getting the conversation in full. But yeah, I was saying that in terms of defining what are your big rocks for 2019 and for 2021, would you say that your focus would be much more on retention and kind of serving even better your current customers, or it would be much more focused on acquisition, expanding across Europe to another markets? So if you would need to define one of those priorities, would it be in both?
No. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a good point, actually. And I think some companies get stuck in that kind of, if you want to call it, choice. You either got to expand or we're going to, satisfy what we have at the moment. One thing I did find very surprising about Talkdesk when I joined is that the company's ethos is very, very geared towards not just acquiring new customers, but customer success. So as a company, we put a huge amount of focus in that area, very strong kind of executive leadership in that area as well. And also Tiago as well is passionate about referenceability of his client base, referenceability of success in the marketplace. And how do we make sure that our customers are successful, and how do we publish that across the marketplace? So it's a way of us almost attracting new customers by being so fanatical about how we enjoy our customers to be successful and how we then publish their success. So it's actually, you can see how the two kind of link into each other. So it's by keeping your customers happy, by publishing their success. Currently, guess what? We're growing the business as well. It's a very simplistic way of doing it, but absolutely the right way of doing it. So priorities are absolutely like that, and I think that's one of the strengths of us, entering the European market with such a good presence in Portugal, where we've got our customer success organization. It's a stable, well-defined, well-run, established ecosystem, where we are, like I said, managing not only European existing customers, but also a lot of North American customers as well are managed through that area. So we've got that strength of positioning. So, it makes my job much more easier when I can, go prospecting in London and we can attract new customers. And we've got this really established success customer base at the moment in place.
This is a very good point that you raised it, because usually that's the second point that we talk when we are discussing how to scale up a company, which is alignment. And
Sure.
you just brought the importance of partnering with customer success to also accomplish part of your goals and the other organization goals. So especially at this stage with 500 plus people across the world with different time zones, almost since the beginning of the company, sometimes it's difficult to keep everyone aligned and the business moving in the same direction. So what are some of your main challenges kind of connecting with the functional leaders, with the market leaders? So what are some of your challenges that you've been facing when kind of putting everyone on the same page?
Yeah, absolutely. It is quite interesting, because I think and I'll be frank now, I'm sure we will have more challenges in the future. I think we're fortunate enough to be also a company of, yes, we are 500 people, but we still have got a very close management team. We still got a very close culture of communication. And I also think that, Tiago's also been very wise in bringing together people that have the same, almost cultural working style. So, naturally people slot in, they work together, they communicate well. And I think that's helped us align when it comes to, driving the business and making sure that we are all working in the same direction and pushing in the same direction. In addition to that, although we are a pretty young company, we have also got a good cadence around setting the vision of the business. So, as an organization, we've actually got a process, an OKR process, which I'm sure you've heard about before. Yep. So where you actually, you publish the organization's goals, and it basically trickles down through the organization. So everyone's aware of it, right from the CEO right down to the people that deliver it. And that helps, because it provides that structure around what we need to do and how we all need to kind of pull together. So, as always, there's work to be done, but I've seen much worse in my career, trust me.
That's a very good point. And just for people to follow why we are going into this direction in the conversation. So we started by understanding a little bit of more who is Teon and how was his career, how you move it to Talkdesk, why Talkdesk, why EMEA now for Talkdesk. Then we discussed it, how can we define the big rocks? You just summarized it now that you use the OKR system to do it across the world, across functions, across markets, etc. And now we were getting into more the alignment issue and assuring that everyone is on the same page. And I was thinking that, of course, if you have clear what is your strategy, what you want to execute, if everyone is on board, if you are focused, now you need to have the right people on board. And I assume that, of course, you said that Talkdesk has almost or more than 250 clients at this stage in Europe, which is a very good start. I would not say a start. It's amazing. So what are your challenges in terms of attracting talent to a market as the UK, where maybe Talkdesk is not the strong brand as it is in terms of brand awareness as in the US, for instance?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think, if you had to ask me what are my kind of top challenges in general, it is definitely attracting talent and building the team. So there's two parts to this. One is attracting talent, but then there's also attracting the right kind of talent as well. We've got very, very big growth objectives in the marketplace. I'm sure I mentioned to you this already, or I may have not mentioned to you, but as a business, we are aiming to be about 50 to 60 people in the UK and across Iberia as a go-to-market organization. So that's excluding our operations that we have in Portugal, our development support, etc. out there. Which is a huge size. I mean, to give you some kind of an idea of scale, I mean, as a pure play contact center vendor, we would be, I'd say, the largest one from just a go-to-market team perspective, if you exclude all the additional components. So we're going from I'd say very small to that in a year. So that's a fantastic growth. So with that comes huge amounts of pressure as far as growing the team, and it is very tough. As far as how to deal with that type of growth and what we've seen works, it is very much by leveraging every single resource that you have available to you. Simple as that. As an example, we do not use external consultancy, so we don't use agencies at all. We have a policy internally, which I think has actually helped us a bit, because it's actually helped us to kind of focus our attention on using resources that we have more control over. And what I mean by that is we have an internal talent team that is, at the moment now, we've just got now some talent managers in the UK, but before we were using the European and the American talent agencies, talent team in our company. But it's about leveraging the actual team that we have existing. So it's about using our own networks and actually trying to just using the network and pushing further. And by that, we've actually managed to attract some absolutely fantastic people. And I think that if you put some effort behind it, you can achieve some really strong results. And so far we've actually built the team out. We're approaching now 20 people already. We started to do the development from January 3rd as far as growing the team. And we are a few months in, and we're already up to 20, and we've got another 30 people to go. So from that perspective, you can see the growth. And like I said, really strong people, really strong backgrounds. And we've also been, when you look at the kind of talent that we're looking for, it is the right kind of talent with the right kind of DNA. So, not everyone's the right kind of person to work for Talkdesk, as I'm sure, everyone's got their certain profile that we're looking for. But, the kind of company we are, being quite a disruptive organization, also having a certain amount of dynamism to how we work. We're very quick, we're very agile, and we also are a kind of a no-nonsense type of business as well. So we don't have time for politics. We don't have time for wasting time. It's all about how do we satisfy customers, how do we make them successful, and how do we move forward. We attract those kind of people. So we've been lucky, and we really do put a lot of energy and effort in the process of finding people and then putting them through a very strict process that we go through, the recruitment process, to get them on board, and doing that in a very short amount of time as well. So that's another key challenge.
And that's a very good point. And maybe before going there, I was thinking about going deeper into the onboarding process, where there is always a lot of learnings. But before, and to make the question even more interesting to the audience as well, would be, what kind of roles are you hiring at this stage of the company?
Yeah, perfect. Well, again, so that's a good question. So for my particular area, which is obviously the go-to-market group, the main focus is sales. We have two roles. It's commercial and enterprise salespeople. Then we also have, the additional supporting functions around that. So that would be your solution engineers or sales engineers, you want to call them. We also have channel people, marketing people, and then another layer of people around that which support us as well. So we also have, the talent managers, sales operations, etc. So it's the whole go-to-market organization that we have, but very much focused on the key component, which is the sales side. Not to forget about the management as well, because when you've got 50, 60 people, there's a layer of management or two layers of management involved there as well.
Got it. And in terms of were the main things setting up the process of onboarding? I know that this question is really global.
Sure.
You might have some particularities in the local process.
Sure.
But is there any kind of lessons or learning points that you would like to share with the audience about things that are improving your onboarding process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a few things. I mean, number one, I think you have to keep it simple. That's number one. I think sometimes people over-engineer the onboarding process and over-engineer the actual ramp-up process for people, which extends the timescales out and creates a lot of confusion sometimes. So keep it simple. The other thing is set expectations from day one. I think that's one of the things I've really learned is, that first week, that first day that somebody joins your company, if you give them the right impression and you set the aspirations and the expectations from day one, from the first minute, from the first second, from the first hour, it makes a huge difference to the entire experience that person will have in the company. And we've seen it in the past. We've even made mistakes where, unfortunately, maybe somebody starts at the wrong time or the structure wasn't perfect on that particular day. And we've seen that person's just taken that extra few weeks to get to a level. Whereas with other people, when you've just got that focus from day one, and you really set those expectations from day one. And the expectations I'm talking about are just the cadence of what you expect from their role, a very clear understanding of what their performance metrics are. And I'm talking about salespeople, for example, and also making sure they understand the culture of how people work in the company. So we tend to be quite focused on, activity, and also making sure that people are kind of, using the tools that we have in our company. So when we find when people are, when we give them the right structure from day one, they are a different animal.
Absolutely. And it comes back to our first discussion a little bit around the OKRs and the focus question. And I have already 2 points that kind of emerged from this conversation, which is the segment discussion and the geographical market discussion. So let's start with the segment discussion. And I'm sure that, again, in the US and in the global US discussions several times. So usually people that say that companies who are trying to reach out, not in the scale-up stage, but in the earlier stage, to go to SMEs and to enterprise, or to mid-sized companies to enterprise, this is a difficult jump. And sometimes they need to compromise sales and results or targets on the short term to have higher targets on the long term. So what are your learnings there? So doing the jump from SMEs to enterprise, and at the same time keeping two segments, how do you structure the team to kind of serve those two priorities without getting overwhelmed and distracted?
Yeah, that's a very good point. It has been a challenge for our company, and I'm maybe not the right person to fully describe the challenges because I wasn't here when the challenges were in place. But I'll say 2-3 years ago, the company went through that pain of really moving from a SME organization into much more of an enterprise company. But today, when you look at the kind of companies we're servicing and the kind of roles, the kind of customers we're attracting, they are definitely enterprise. Some of the largest banks in the world we're speaking to at the moment, and you name it, a telco, et cetera. We've got some really strong, interesting projects on at the moment. I think the transition is interesting because as we all know, the SME side is much more of a tactical velocity involved, and there's a lot more focus on the dynamism of the cell versus actually getting deeper into the actual structure and the strategy of what needs to be done. So those are very different disciplines, and you can't have a sales team which is doing both sides. You need to have a segmentation, and you also need to have the efficiencies of scale when it comes to that. So there's an element of building the sales team to be an enterprise sales team. There's not just building the team. You have to get the right people with the right profile. You have to have the right experience, and then you also have to equipment with the right training and make sure they know what they need to be, they know what needs to be done. And a lot of that you cannot learn overnight. It does come from experience. So you need to have people that are very experienced, that do understand how enterprise sales works and have and has achieved success in the past. So I think Tiago did make some very specific intentional hires in that area. So a colleague of mine, my opposite number in the US, Rolf, who's come on board from Genesis as well, and he runs the enterprise sales team in the US. And those type of people we need in the company because they have a view of what needs to be done and how we do things. as far as our segmentation, I think I mentioned to you earlier, we have two roles: commercial and enterprise. They are both strategic to us as a company. They just play in different parts of the marketplace. And for us, the commercial side is looking at companies that are very, they are smaller type of companies. They tend to be companies with employee sizes of somewhere between 200 to 500 people. We can obviously scale slightly lower than that. And then on the enterprise side, we're looking at companies from 300 to, upwards from that, hundreds of thousands of people, potentially even. So, and the sales team will, as you can appreciate, it's very different because, in the commercial side, they are very quickly getting into quite senior people in the company. They can make a decision quite quickly. And the deal sizes are lower. The amount of people that you need to get involved in those deals, the value you need to build is slightly different, and it can be done in a much higher velocity. On the enterprise side, it can be quite challenging, and that's where you need the experience because it's not easy to get stuck into a global bank and navigate a 12, 18, 24-month sales cycle with potentially 100 stakeholders who have all got a political alignment in order to get the outcome that you need. So that kind of thing needs a lot of a lot of focus, and you need to have the right experience. So and that's why you have to hire the right people, I'd say.
Absolutely, and this might be a good question. I'm sure that a lot of the Scaleup executives that are listening or that will be listening this conversation later have in their minds. So how do I get, if they are especially venture backed, how do I get to 100 million ARR? And they are doing their calculations of what would be the average contract value and what would be the number of customers that they would need to multiply in order to get to this magical number. And at the same time, getting the pressure on sales and on targets and kind of saying, we are doing the right thing. So we are growing number of customers and we are also growing on revenues, and maybe a bet on enterprise, as you said, might have results in 24 months. So, and we don't want to wait to see that the company will be scaling much faster, but it will take an investment. Also in terms of cash, which might be the last point of this conversation. And so what would you say? So you should start segmenting the team to be one person kind of owning one of the segments and another person owning another segment and building their teams across marketing and sales and customer success. I believe that it has also an impact there. So what would be your advice?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's one of those interesting ones as far as how big your teams are. Obviously, when you've got a small team, you have to sometimes everyone has to kind of muck in and help as much as possible. Yeah. As soon as your team starts to grow out, I mean, I'm a big believer in specialization. So having a scenario where there's as much specialization as possible within the team, and there's measurement. And there is analysis on people's performance and reporting so that you understand kind of how do you industrialize the sales process as much as possible. That's a big thing that we are very focused on, and that's why we are able to, I believe, to kind of grow at the levels that we're growing, because we've looked at this with a very kind of intentional view of saying it all has to boil down into some meaningful activities that kind of build and grow with the plan to actually achieve the kind of opportunities that we need to grow to. So for us, we are very, very focused on pipeline, focused on how do you make pipeline. And I think organizations a lot of the time what they do is they get distracted by various things along the way when they start growing, but you have to do the right things every day. It's very much of a do the right things constantly every single day. Make sure you're watching your business, make sure that you're building a repetitive model as far as how you are generating pipeline, how you're maturing the pipeline, how you're measuring the activity that's supporting that pipeline. And then you have to have the right sales execution, the right sales discipline in the sales team in order to kind of, drive those results through. So, when you get that ecosystem running properly and you get the specialization in place, that's really where you can start then tweaking it to make it as optimal as possible. But yeah, hopefully that answers part of your question.
It's not an easy one, and it might be, of course, the topic of an entire
absolutely
of a podcast. But yeah, you just introduced an interesting topic, which is accountability, and
sure.
Talking about alignment, focus, and coming back to accountability and having the discipline and the routines in place to measure the right metrics, to take the right decisions, to meet daily, weekly, monthly. So how does your meeting rhythms or your adults work to keep everyone on the same page and to keep everyone accountable?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm a firm believer in, if you want something done, you measure it. It's an old saying, but it works pretty well. And I also think it's people, especially dealing up. Obviously, I deal a lot with salespeople, but salespeople like to know kind of how are they measured and what's important, and then not only just giving them the actual measurements, but actually explaining to them the reasons why they're important. And I think once the business buys into that, I think you can get a lot more buy-in to what you're trying to achieve. And we spend a lot of time in educating our organization, educating our team to understand the reasons we are measuring certain things and why we're doing it, and we're getting a really strong result coming back. We measure the fundamentals, so the basics, if you want to call it that. So the key things, calls made, emails sent, the basics like that. But then we also look at other things, like we look at, for example, how are people managing their accounts and how are they expanding the reach in their accounts. We also look at, obviously, pipeline. So we're looking at things like, how is pipeline maturing over time? So, how are deals progressing through the funnel, and at what stages and what timescales they're moving through the funnel. And the ramp up as far as supporting the sales team is also very important. And this comes back to your earlier question about, how do we onboard salespeople? So as hard as it is to find somebody, you can't just find somebody, put them in a role and say, go knock yourself out. It's a case of how do you support them? Because, you spend so much time and energy finding a person, training the person, onboarding the person. And if they're not going to be successful, you're effectively going to push yourself back 6 months to a year to find somebody else and go through the pain of finding a new person. So you've got a lot of investment in that person. And, one thing that I'm a firm believer in is that you need to make that person successful. So, if you've gone through the pain of hiring them and putting them in the role, you have to go through the pain of then making sure they're successful. And I think, when you surround a person with all that structure, with the measurement, with the support that they need, and then also give them the vision that they need in order to be successful, so they understand why they're doing things and they understand how their role fits into the global, opportunity. You can get a lot of performance out of somebody, and that's really what I like to focus on. And then if you layer on that, obviously the measurements there, so that if you find a scenario where the numbers are not adding up, you can then quickly jump on that and say, how do we support you further? And support the person, in longer term.
And talent success, kind of a new word for the discussion and for a new function and a new role. And in terms of meeting rhythms, do you have any kind of weekly meeting putting together all the sales team? So how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're asking me some nice technical questions, which is good. I like it. So I'm also a firm believer in, I like to start the week and I like to end the week. And I think, that's a really good thing. So we have we call it a kind of a meeting huddle, a sales huddle every Monday morning. And it's a really, really, really important part of the week actually for the salespeople. So we start off, we review what we've got to do, and we look at kind of the performance from last week, and we look at the goals for the future week. And we do that as a sales team. It gets everyone going. It gets everyone fired up. It gets everyone honed in on what they need to achieve for that week. We also include other functions. So we bring in marketing. We bring in technical side of our business, bringing the channel side, so that everyone's got the opportunity to understand, okay, you're doing really well, you need support, what do we need to do? And I think people enjoy that framework. Monday mornings, like I said, are always a good time, not too early, but not too late. And then Fridays, we actually loved ending the week on a particular, a kind of a high as well. So a little bit more of a, I'd say more of an educational type of session. We did ours at 4:30 this afternoon, UK time. So we spend about half an hour to an hour with the entire team. We expand that actually to a wider group. So we include our SDRs or our sales development people. And then what we do is we basically talk through best practices, learnings from the week. We talk about, how can we all improve? And you'd be surprised what really good sharing happens between the team. People coming forward and saying, I've discovered this new tool, or, I really learned something really interesting, and people love it. So it's a really good way of kind of sharing information, and you end on a high. You end the week and you go from there. And, we're pulling people together from multiple geographical locations. And I think people also quite appreciate the fact that we are all together on a team together as one call, which is pretty good. And then obviously, in addition to that, we do sales meetings, QBRs, forecast calls, all those fun things that people usually do.
Got it. And this is a very, very interesting point that that I like. I would love to have, again, an entire podcast with you just to go through it and understand the template of the agenda and how do you keep the morale of the team. Because, yeah, usually companies, especially when they are transitioning from a startup stage to a scale-up stage, 8 bureaucracy, 8 meetings, 8 any kind of structure, and believe that they have been having some success because they didn't have that kind of structure of corporates and so on, and they don't want to have structure. And then they start realizing that the system is broken and they need to have some structure in any way, because if not, they will not scale at all. So then they start making possible that everyone knows the strategy. What are the main priorities for the company for the long term, mid-term, and short term? And then we come back to execution. So we need to keep everyone aligned in a daily basis, in a weekly basis, in a monthly basis, because the business is always changing. And in the scale-up stage, it can change even more than the startup stage. There is much more iterations, much more people involved in the process. So it can be overwhelming even to be updated about everything that is going on in the business. And an important way of keeping everyone updated is by having amazing meetings, amazing meeting experiences. And usually those meetings are the last thing that people want to join, especially when they have very aggressive targets and they want to be outside every meetings with clients and trying to achieve their quotas. So how do you keep people motivated first to not start missing weekly meeting after weekly meeting and kind of saying, come on, you need to come because it's part of your duty to come, and having people excited about, yes, I will have a weekly meeting and we will revise all the process. I will learn a lot from my colleagues. And as you said, I will be energized to start the week with even more energy and more learnings on the pocket. As a leader, how do you create this environment?
It's a good point. So no, I think, I'll be frank, with trial and error. I have made mistakes in the past, and I have had a few dud meetings in my past as well. But I think a few things. The first thing is, I think clear expectations on what people need to do is very important. So, everyone likes to perform well and everyone likes to be part of a meeting. I'm a firm believer in getting people involved. So everyone needs to know that they have a deliverable in that meeting. It's not the case of we get 15 people on the phone, one person talks for half an hour and everyone just goes nods. No, everyone's participating and they've all got a role to play. So it's important people understand what their role is and how they contribute. But the other point I think is quite important is, I've learned over time is that a meeting must deliver value. And it's all good and well saying, you work for this company, we will tell you information and you've just got to listen to us. The reality is people zone out, and more so if there's no video call. But I think the point here is that, you need to realize that what is the value of this? What is the value of what you're telling people? And also there needs to be a certain amount of, how can I say, I'm not going to say entertainment. No, I'm not going to say entertainment, but the delivery of that value is important as well, because you need to hold people's attention. So, if you're coming with a very dry message for half an hour, people are not going to engage with that. So it's about how do you package that up? And there's a certain amount of preparation that's needed as well. So for example, if you can imagine, our end of week meetings are called TGIF, you know what that means. And we basically, before we do that meeting, it's not just we all jump on a call and it's a very simple thing. We actually have preparation calls for that subject matter. We agree on the subject matter. We prepare what we're going to be showing. We prepare slides, and we don't make it dry. We make it a bit, there's motion happening. We have videos showing. We talk between ourselves. We got some energy in the room, and I think that's important. And you can hear from people's engagement in the meeting, that they enjoy it. So I think, it's what you put in is what you get out, and I think it's expectation setting around the table as far as what you expect from people to bring to the meeting.
Got it. And we are almost at the end of this conversation, and so many questions, so many points that I'd like to approach.
Sure.
And we didn't expand also on the geographical structure of a sales team, but I'd like to close with the last piece of the scaling up framework that we keep discussing week after week, which is the cash component. Of course, the sales team needs some time to start creating value. At the same time, the good thing is it's very measurable and very easy to measure if it is working or not working. But in a cash perspective, you need to allocate your resources in a wise way, and you can be more aggressive or more conservative on hiring and on defining the targets that you want to achieve. So how do you manage this trade-off of being more aggressive, or I mean hiring more people and putting yourself in pressure because the cash flow will be kind of burning much quicker, and if you don't start meeting the sales quotas, this could put the company in trouble?
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Good point. So we are fortunate enough, well, two things. So we're fortunate enough to have a very good sales operations organization in our company, who have really been instrumental in structuring our growth, which is very important because, I from my career, obviously I'm very well experienced in building teams, putting the structure in place, motivating, coaching, and client acquisition. But as you saw, I mean, as you know, people like me are very much about going ho, build, but we need structure below us. And I think it's important to have the sales operations people in place to provide that structure. So one thing I could definitely say is, put in place a plan. And the plan has to be comprehensive, but also very realistic. And there's always going to be a balance between being pessimistic and over enthusiastic. Set something which is realistic, and then have management checkpoints as far as how's progress progressing, and are we on track, and have those KPIs that you can measure. Is the pipeline growing at the right rate? Is the hiring coming in at the right rate as far as people being added to the process? Have you provided enough time for people to get onboarded and actually be able to contribute to the actual business? So I think the plan's important, realism in the plan's important, measurement of the plan's important. And then, if you get those factors right, then you also need to, if one of those leading indicators are not coming to, building up, you need to be able to jump on that and then say, can we contribute to it? Because I think you're right. I think a lot of companies take a bit of a haphazard view to planning, and they don't really check in to see the progress, and they don't really understand, what are they building and why they're building. And then, like you said, before you know it, you've got an organization that just can't sustain itself. So there's a bit of that needs to be put in place.
And impact on the morale of the team with scaling, and then needs to downsize to scale again later. It can create a recessive or a recession circle. Sure. In the confidence sure. of the team, which can be very dangerous. So we are on time, and I would love to close the podcast with one of my favorite questions, which is, if you would have the opportunity to meet Teon 10 years ago, give him an advice and have a frank conversation face to face with him, what would you tell him?
Oh my God, that's one thing. That's a question. What would I tell him? That's a good question. I would tell him to have invested more money in property.
Okay, that's a very good answer. I never got that one. So why? I need to ask why.
Why? Well, I mean, we've had some good growth in property over the last few years in the UK, and I think, if I look back, there were a few opportunities I should have put some money in more property. I did put some money in property, but I should have put more money in property. Maybe leveraged myself more on the property side. But no, that's just one that came to life there as well. I mean, from a career perspective, I think. I think risk taking is important. I think maybe you also need to know in your career sometimes not to stay too long. I think there's also a view of get to a point where you've got everything out of the opportunity, and then make a conscious move to move on. I can say there's maybe one or two parts of my career where I think I could have made a more conscious jump quicker, but you learn from these things and you get value in other ways. So all good.
Amazing, Teon. Thanks so much for this amazing conversation. So many lessons, so many points to be applied. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to get to know more about what some of the best scale-up executives in the world are doing to scale their companies worldwide, feel free to visit us at scaleupvalley.com/community, and you would get 62 episodes today to watch across different functions, different geographies from some of the best companies in the world. Teon, thank you so much.
Pleasure,
and
Mike. Thank you.
see you all next week. Thank you very much.